This is Barry, and welcome to the Simplicity Zen podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you could take a moment and hit subscribe and alert, I'd very much appreciate it. For one, my kids get really excited when I get more likes, which is probably the major motivation to do it. And also, YouTube's algorithm and how far they distribute this podcast is significantly based on how many people like the videos and how many subscribe. So if you could do that, I'd really appreciate it. If you're watching this on audio, you can go to the website at simplicityzen.com and sign up for future updates there. Today, my guest is Soan Jim Hare. Jim is a Soto Zen priest in the Suzuki Roshi Soto lineage with residential Zen practice at San Francisco Zen Center and Tassajara Mountain Center. He was also Susho, or head student, at a practice period at Green Gulch Farm Zen Center in Marin. He is the founder of Valley Streams Zen Sangha, which at the time was called Iron Bell, in Sacramento, where he currently serves in the position of Tanto, or head of practice. Thanks for being here today with us, Jim.
Thanks for having me, Barry.
Did I mess up anything in that introduction? Is that all factually correct?
That's Shuso is the pronunciation, but yes, that's.
What did I say?
I don't know. It didn't sound quite like that, but.
Oh, okay. I'm sure I messed it up. Yeah, so thanks for being here. Were you or you were not ordained when you were Shusho, is that correct? Shusho?
That's correct. I was a layperson when I was Shuso.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about where you grew up?
I'm from California. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area and in the town of Richmond, and then when I was in high school, my family moved to Lafayette, and I went to high school in Walnut Creek.
Okay. Yeah, I like that area. And you kind of came of age, so you're kind of perfectly situated age-wise to kind of had your formative years during the late 60s. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah.
Late 60s, early 70s. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And were you raised religious at all?
Yes, my family was nominally religious. My mother was a churchgoer, and we went to a Methodist church in Richmond. And I was an altar boy, but I would say nominally religious was the description of the family. We didn't have any. It was like go to church and then get on with your life.
Would you characterize yourself as a believer as a child?
No, I don't. I think I wondered about what church was all about, but I didn't have any great feeling for it. I enjoyed being an altar boy. It was just kind of a performance thing to do, to carry this. I don't know what they call it, but anyway, it's a lit flame on a stick on a pole, and you go up and light the candles on the altar, and it's a processional, it's a ceremony essentially at the beginning of a service. So
almost like Jisha, maybe a little bit.
Yeah, maybe like Jisha, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then so now, I mean, you never know someone's eternal state, but me knowing you as adults, I mean, you seem pretty extroverted and enjoying people. Is that the case for you growing up and as a teenager?
No, I don't. I think especially when I was quite young, my teachers thought I was rather quiet, and even talked to my parents about their concern that I was not very social or very verbal, and that was when I was quite young, though. And then I seemed to grow out of that at a fairly, not too long after that. And I would say your description is right, that I was social, became a social person, and had friends, and enjoyed the company of others.
Yeah. Would you say there's anything in your teenage years that kind of, if we were looking at him then, was kind of would be like, aha, no wonder he turned into a Zen practitioner. Did you have any interaction with Eastern spirituality, or I mean, were you reading Alan Watts or Tao Te Ching or Dharma Bums or any of that kind of stuff?
No, I wasn't. I would say I would characterize my teenage years as sort of average, confused person,
Okay.
not knowing exactly which end was up, and kind of just doing what I was supposed to do, although starting to become rather rebellious as time went on.
Mm-hmm.
But generally, I would say confused teenage person would be a good description of me as a teenager.
Which I think is pretty par for the course for as a human being, I think.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty weird to be
nothing remarkable there.
Yeah. When did you so you've mentioned, so I didn't say the early part of this podcast, but Jim is he's the teacher at a Soto Zen place I frequent on a weekly basis, and I think he's been informally one of my teachers. I don't know if Jim would consider that and one of my teachers, but from my end I consider it. For a couple of years now. So I know him pretty well from chatting with him informally in his Dharma talks and stuff. And you've mentioned a couple of times how you became involved in 60s protests and stuff like that. Was that when you're still a teenager?
No, I transferred to Berkeley in 1968. I graduated high school in 1966, and I went a couple of years to UC Santa Barbara, and was starting to get aware of the social, of the Vietnam War particularly, and the civil rights movement, and I was at Santa Barbara when Martin Luther King was killed, and John F. Kennedy was killed. Robert F. Kennedy was killed. Just a few months later, and that had a big impact on me in 1968. And I had been starting to become politically involved, and I was campaigning in Santa Barbara for Eugene McCarthy for president, and but I was starting to become a fan of RFK, and then he was killed, and I felt like I was called to do something more be more engaged. And so one thing I did was I started tutoring a young Black boy in Santa Barbara, and in math and other subjects, and just felt like I have to do something, and that there was a time that called for action, and I should be part of that, and so I decided in '68 to transfer to Berkeley, and then I transferred into the hotbed of doing something about the war and civil rights, and because '68 was I transferred there and ostensibly started to go to school, but then I started joining picket lines, and ended up pretty much not going to class all of 1968 and '69 because of the various student strikes that happened during that year.
Was the vibe at the time, so from the assassinations, there was shock, but was there anger? Was there dismay? I mean, like what was the vibe among you and your peers at the time? Was it outrage?
I think it was shock that turned into outrage. Yes. I mean, the year after I left Santa Barbara, the students there burned down the Bank of America, and I went to Berkeley, but we were on striking for a third world college, and then in the spring, People's Park happened in Berkeley in the spring of '69, and so it was shock and upset over the war and the way that the U.S. was throwing its weight around in the world and not taking care of people at home. And so that did, turn into to anger and action based on anger. And, there was and I became, swept up in that myself, in the streets, running in the streets, and increasingly getting more and more radicalized.
And by radicalized, do you mean that you wanted significant transformation of society, or like how, I guess I don't really know what that means. Like,
well, I think what it means is moving from the idea of peaceful protest to at that time to more engaged and even violent action in the street, thinking that by any means possible, that we needed to put our bodies on the line. That was the feeling that became more and more among myself and people that I began to know. I mean, when I moved to Berkeley, I joined a fraternity, so my transformation was really rapid. I mean, I actually didn't join a fraternity to be part of the brotherhood, but it was a good place to live more. But it turned out that the fraternity I was attracted to actually did have a lot of people who were interested in social change, and it wasn't quite as traditional a fraternity as many of them are.
What was there a sense of like optimism and inevitability of change among you and your peers, or was it kind of despair a little? Like, did you think like we're going to make a change, or is it?
Well, I came to think that. I came to think that we were going to make a change. But again, I was a little myopic at the time. I lived in Berkeley, and the how things looked in Berkeley was not quite how things looked all over the country. It did look that way in various places, but it wasn't as stark as it was looking in Berkeley, or black and white as it looked in Berkeley.
Did you ever make it over to the Bay, to the Haight-Ashbury scene and the Human Being? I guess the Human Being was 67, but did you ever?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I was mostly involved in things in Berkeley, but yeah, we would go to the park for various activities. And when I was in high school, I mean, I was part of the scene, the Fillmore Auditorium, the Avalon Ballroom, and going to those concerts, and as a high school student. So
cool.
I got to be part of that, a little bit of part of that, Bill Graham, Avalon Ballroom, Fillmore Auditorium scene, and that sort of thing. And
do you remember?
I mean, it brought the whole. It was such an opening time of change and possibility, and there was a feeling of just trying everything, and I was part of that. I became part of that, trying everything.
Was there any kind of spiritual or mystical component to that, or was it just fun? Like the whole.
No, I mean, things changed very rapidly for me. And the interesting thing was that out of my radicalism, I decided in 1970 to go to Cuba on the Venceremos Brigade, which was an American. It was actually sponsored by the Communist Party, I believe. That was to send delegations of Americans to express their solidarity with the Cuban Revolution, and make an ultimate statement of protest against, because it was illegal to travel to Cuba from the United States at that time. And I was still quite a confused person, but I did decide to do that as an act of protest, to go on the 2nd Venceremos Brigade. And the interesting connection is, there is where I met the person who introduced me to Zen, on that
Oh, really?
Yeah, in
Who was
Cuba.
that?
I met a fellow named John Sikora, who was, if he ever sees this podcast, I'd love to hear from him. I've lost touch with him a long time ago, but I met him, and he was interested in macrobiotics and Zen, and those two things were kind of went together at that time. Being into macrobiotics was kind of a thing that Zen people were interested in, and so he was interested, and it was after we came back from Cuba. Well, a lot of things happened that year for me, because I came back in May of 1970, and about 4 days later, I got arrested in a protest. And the only ID I had on me was my passport, which was stamped having just been to Cuba. So I got interviewed by the FBI, and
wow.
and checked out by them, and I'm sure I've still got a record with them somewhere. But I was so I was arrested in a big demonstration in around the invasion of Cambodia in May 1970, and this is when the National Guard bombed the campus of UC Berkeley with tear gas from helicopters, and it was incredible. Street fighting happened, for days at a time, days on end. And I just could come back from Cuba, and I was probably at the apogee of my radicalism at that moment. And so I was out in the street and did some things that got me arrested and charged with some pretty serious crimes against the police. I didn't hurt anybody, but nevertheless, they had some photographs of me that were rather compromising, which was, throwing stones. So that summer I was in court a lot, and I was trying to, I had a free lawyer that was provided to me through legal aid, and I was trying to get the best deal I could in terms of my sentence, because they pretty much had all the evidence they needed to convict me. And I was charged with some felonies, and so through the summers, the lawyer tried to get everything knocked down to misdemeanors, so I wouldn't have to, have that on my record. But what happened that summer was also that John Sikora came out from the East Coast. He lived in Long Island, and he came out from East Coast, and he and I decided to hitchhike to Big Sur and hike into Tassajara.
Okay.
And
did you know it as a Zen monastery at that point?
Yeah, it was a Zen monastery at that point.
So did you know it as a hot springs, or did you also know it as a Zen monastery?
I mean, through John, I knew it was a Zen monastery. And I had really no background in Zen at all at that time. But I liked John, so again, I said something like, we tried everything at those years, whatever, it was like, okay, let's do that now. And so he and I hitchhiked to Big Sur, and we walked into Tassajara over about 3 or 4 days, and we didn't take very much food. And by the time we got to Tassajara, we were really, really hungry. And we walked in there and we met a monk, and he immediately told us to turn around and go back from where we came, which was completely impossible. We would have starved to death because we just didn't have any food. So we went back out in the flats and camped out again, and then tried our luck the next day. And luckily we met somebody else who was much kinder. And so he let us take a bath, and we heard a lecture in the Zendo, and then they arranged they arranged a ride out for us. We couldn't stay there, but they gave us, they got somebody, one of the guests, to give us a ride out of there. But that was my introduction to Zen, as it were. I mean, I didn't know anything about what I was doing there, except that I was with my friend. But
was there a little bit of maybe hope that you'd be able to stay there when you guys showed up?
I don't think we had any idea what we were doing. All we were doing was we were going to hike there, and we had no plan for what would happen when we got there. I guess we thought we would be received with open arms, which wasn't the case, and there was no place. They didn't want us, and I think in those days we weren't the only hippies that backpacked in there and wanted to check out the Zen master. And but anyway, it was my introduction, and it was after that. It was after that trip that I picked up Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, which had just been published pretty recently before that. And I picked up Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind to start seeing what the heck this was all about, because I really didn't know.
Do you remember who gave the lecture by chance?
No, I've asked Reb Anderson about that, if he could recall who would have been there, and I was hoping it was Suzuki Roshi, but he says Suzuki Roshi wasn't there in the summer of 1970. So it was a Japanese person, however, because I couldn't understand him very well at all. But I don't know. It could have been Tatsugami Roshi or somebody else.
Maybe.
Maybe. But I can't remember. It was all completely. I was like a complete babe in the woods. I had no idea what was going on.
Was there anything about the vibe of Tassajara or the demeanor of the participants that kind of captured you, or?
No, I wouldn't say so. It was just a thing that happened at that time, like a random thing. But it wasn't entirely random because I went in a bookstore. And I was still, a very confused person, really, looking for who I was, what I was going to do in this world. And I don't know, I picked up Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and I was so impressed by the picture of Suzuki Roshi on the back. He was
like
just
raising his eyebrow a little bit.
Yeah, he just had a really serious demeanor. And I thought, whatever this guy's into, he really means it. He's serious about it. And so I was attracted to that. And so, I started carrying that book around with me, and gradually, well, I did end up I ended up in jail the last part of that year for 2.5 months. But I did get, just a misdemeanor conviction, but I had a lot of time to read in the county jail. So
was that pretty sobering?
What's that?
Was that whole experience of the criminal system and jail pretty sobering?
I was so rebellious, Barry. I mean, I tried to organize a prisoner strike. I just was so. And then, after I came out of jail, I was just more radicalized than ever, and started working on anti-war stuff and community control of the police in Berkeley. And, anyway, I was lucky in jail. I mean, I got assaulted once, but it was a minor thing, just got a punch.
Did you ever finish your degree that you kind of?
Oh, I dropped out. That's true. I did drop out. And then I just did radical politics and communal living and psychedelic drugs and for a few years. And then in 1973, I did go back and finish my degree. And at that time is when I started, when I went back to finish my degree, I actually was starting to get interested in spiritual stuff. And I was reading Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind and other things. And I think Be Here Now. And I took a course on Hinduism from Professor Jaini at UC Berkeley, and that was really interesting. But I didn't go on and take the course on Buddhism. So I still wasn't really on that track. But I was starting to get on that track, and then I did finish my degree.
What did you major in?
Economics.
Economics, yeah.
Which was a big waste of time, but for me, because it wasn't what I was interested in.
Right.
I mean, it's not a waste of time for somebody that's interested in economics, but for me, it wasn't really my core interest.
Mm-hmm.
But I had started on that because my dad had majored in economics.
What did your parents think about all this radicalism and jail? And was this freaking them out?
I was very alienated from my parents at that time, and my dad, was very upset with me. They were pretty conservative, or I mean, actually, today they'd be liberal Republicans, really on the liberal side of Republicans, but still they didn't have a vision of a son who was, gonna go and spend time in jail and run off to Cuba and all these different things that I did in my those years. But we eventually got back together. I eventually got back together with my parents, but there was some years there it was pretty alienated.
Yeah, I imagine. So after you graduated, did you start working, or did you?
No. I mean, I'd work enough to make enough money to either go traveling or not work, or just to do political work. And I don't think that the next big thing that happened to me was there was a police shooting. The police killed a guy right around the corner from me in Berkeley. And then the guy he'd done a really bad thing. He was like holding people hostage, and anyway, it was one of these situations. He was holding some people hostage and threatening to kill them, and threatening them harm at least. And then the police shot him and killed him. And it was like right around the corner from me, and that had a big. I don't know. I just decided at that time, I'd finished my school, and I just decided it was time to get out of Berkeley. I needed to be someplace else. So I just kind of went on the road for some while, and I was, I guess you say, kind of just an aimless hitchhiking hippie person, that was running around. I went up to Oregon. I picked fruit up there, and just made enough money, worked in a cannery, just enough money to be able to, get along and meet, I was meeting people. I met some interesting people in the fruit picking camp who were kind of into spirituality, and I actually became, romantically involved with a woman there, and but for a few years I was just drifting around, and I went back to Berkeley, and at some point, and got another job, but I just didn't see my future there. And then I decided I had a really bad breakup. Actually, it was part of what did it, but I had a really bad breakup, and I decided to just move out of state. I just decided to move far away, so I moved back up to Oregon. And
Eugene, if I remember right.
Yeah, to Eugene. And kind of felt like I needed to start over, and also start over outside of the context of radical politics and just what I had been doing. So I moved up to Eugene. I didn't know anybody there, but I quickly got to know some people, and I met some people who were practicing there. And that was when I really started. It was about 1975, and that's when I really started turning toward practice in an actual practice way. I mean, I wasn't a meditator till that point.
Right.
But,
is Eugene where you met your future wife, Karen?
Yes.
Yeah. You met her there. You didn't know her prior to moving there.
No,
Yeah.
I didn't. No, I moved there and I saw a notice on a bulletin board. I had unemployment from working in the cannery, and so I didn't have to work, and somebody offered me a job, but I didn't want to work. And but I saw a notice on a bulletin board for some people that were looking for some actors in a play called The Marvelous Life of the Buddha.
Okay.
And I joined the cast. I won the audition.
What was your role?
I was Buddha, and I was also Buddha's mother.
Okay.
Yeah, it was based on bread and puppet theater, if you've ever heard of that. They large masks that we made, and that was it was like a life-size puppet, and so I had this huge mask for Buddha's mother, and then I made the mask for Buddha, and just if you saw a picture of it, I mean, I've got this really long hair. I mean, it doesn't make any sense at all, but the play didn't have any life. I mean, we performed it about 3 or 4 times, and that was it. But I met those people and actually ended up starting to practice with them.
Mm-hmm. And these were actual Zen practitioners, or more kind of New Agey?
They were they were Zen curious. I guess we were all, you'd say, Zen curious.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we were interested in finding what Zen was, and there was a place called the Eugene Priory at that time, which was an outlet of the Shasta Abbey.
Mm-hmm.
And I went there with a friend that I met in the cast, and at some point I just decided I'm going to start sitting every day.
Mm-hmm.
I just decided that I still didn't feel like I really had like a center in my life. And so I just decided I'm just going to start sitting every day and make that like something, like some kind of anchor for my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I started that.
What was your experience of the sitting? Did you immediately take to it, or was it a struggle for you?
No, I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
I mean, but I was just following the instructions I read in a book, and maybe some instructions I got at the Eugene Priory. But then, one thing led to another, and we started doing some little half-day sittings in somebody's living room there, people that had been in that play.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1978, I believe, maybe 77 or 78, we decided to go to Sesshin because we had one friend there who had gone to Green Gulch and had gone to Zen Center anyway, maybe the city center, or Green Gulch, and had been doing sesshins. And so we went there. We decided to go, and I think 77 or 78, about 3 or 4 of us decided to go sit a sesshin in Green Gulch.
And I'm sure that was really easy.
I was so not ready for that.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't tell you how not ready for that I was.
When you were heading down there, did you realize it was the same organization as Tassajara that you'd visited?
Yeah, I knew. I mean, I knew this is where Suzuki Roshi had taught, and I understood that, but I didn't know anything about formal practice.
Yeah.
I'd never done oryoki. I'd never been in a zendo really for any. I mean, maybe I was in that zendo at Tassajara, but
yeah. Was it? I imagine, physically it's a nightmare for people when they just drop in like that. Even if you're an experienced practitioner, sesshin can be a nightmare. Was it mentally hard as well?
It was so hard, Barry. I can't even tell you. I mean, it was, I mean, I think we talk a lot about trauma today.
Yeah.
But that was some deep trauma, because I wouldn't drop out. I wasn't made that way. I was going to stick it out regardless, but it was so physically hard to do. And then my mind was just raging in so many different directions. And it was just so startling how wild my mind was, and how, and then swing from, this is so great, this is so wonderful, to like, just the depths of despair and pain, and just swinging back and forth, and just so crazy mind, was so obvious to me.
Was Richard Baker was he leading the session?
I think he was. Yeah, I think he was.
Do you have any memories of him from that period?
Well, I don't remember so much of. I mean, later at Tassajara, I was at Tassajara with him, and I certainly remember him from there. But I don't remember him so much from those early sessions. I think I was so self-absorbed that I could probably not even pay attention too much to what was happening around me. But
so no Dokusan, I imagine, during that week.
I don't remember. So I must have. We'd think I would have had, but I don't remember.
Yeah. So after you guys left that session, were you guys just looking at each other and like, what the hell was that? What? Like.
I mean, the funny thing, and I think you've probably experienced this yourself. No matter how seemingly difficult and painful and unsuccessful you feel in a session, still at the end there's something that says that is you feel yourself in a different way. And I was so unused to feeling myself at peace, as a peaceful, relaxed person. That was very startling, because at the end I felt peaceful despite all of that wildness. I felt this kind of peace, and so no matter how hard it was, like 6 months later, we went back for another one.
Well, on your way down there, did you characterize yourself as a Zen practitioner? Was it your main kind of spiritual practice, or were you kind of dabbling?
No, I was just, me and my friends were going to sesshin. That's as far as I thought about it. I mean, I didn't have any idea about being a Zen practitioner particularly at all. I just was trying the next thing, trying the next thing.
Right. So then you came down and did another sesshin, and like, at what point did your level commitment kind of level up to the next level?
Well, I guess it was a combination of, the sitting every day and then going to these sessions, and I met my wife, or my wife to be, in around the same time that I was getting going to these sessions, and she went to session, at least one with us, maybe two. And I don't know how this happened, but we decided at some point, and well, I know what point, in 1980, we decided to get married, and we decided to move to San Francisco and practice at San Francisco Zen Center.
And you moved there because of San Francisco Zen Center?
Well, I told myself that I was actually going there to go to the to go back to school, and I was going to go back to school in counseling. But when I got there, I did not enroll in school, and I did start going to the Zen Center every day. And so it became quickly clear to me that, well, I had told myself this story because I didn't think I could just tell myself a story that you're going to, practice at a Zen Center, and that's what you're going to do with the next stage of your life. But anyway, that turned out to be the real story.
Did you move down there? Were you living off campus, or did you live at Page Street?
No, we got an apartment. Somebody in Eugene knew somebody that was giving up an apartment in the Mission, and it just worked out, and we got that apartment, and we rode our bikes to Zazen every morning at whatever it was, 4:30.
So at that point, your commitment was deepening.
Yeah, I mean, I started. I think I didn't do practice period that fall because we were just getting kind of established. But then I think in the spring I did a practice period. And so that's, you had to go every day. You had to sit all the 1-day sittings, and you had to sit sesshin at the end. So, that's a pretty, and you also took a class during practice period. So, yeah, I was starting to completely commit to that.
And was Richard Baker was the teacher?
Richard Baker was the teacher.
What was your initial impressions of him when you kind of first started really focusing on him and seeing him as kind of the leader and so forth?
Well, in a sense, he is why I moved to Zen Center. I mean,
Okay.
He was brilliant. I mean, he's a brilliant man and a kind of a genius teacher, and he's very charismatic and attractive to many people, and so I was as attracted to him as many people were, and attracted to his understanding of the Dharma, his stories about Suzuki Roshi. Had been an early disciple of Suzuki Roshi, and obviously the only person to whom Suzuki Roshi transmitted. And so I was, he was the man at that time. That was toward the end of as it turned out, it was toward the end of his time at Zen Center. But at that time, he was still very much in command, and he was, very attractive to me as a teacher. A powerful man.
Were there any senior students that stood out to you at the time, like Myo or Reb Anderson or Blanche Hartman or any of
Yeah, Reb, I think when I first moved there was Tanto, and he was the head of practice, or head of the Ton in City Center. So I was attracted to him as well. And I got to know him, and I had Dokusan. I remember having Dokusan with him when we lived in the city. And yeah, that just moving there and just was just an opportunity to be taught by that whole community. Linda Ruth Cutts, Catherine Thanos were there. There were a lot of people there that were, had been practicing for quite a while, and really they had known Suzuki Roshi or practiced with him. And there were a lot of people to get to know and learn from, not just the teachers. I mean, the whole community was a learning exchange. It was.
How quickly did you make your way down to Tassajara? Did you work there in the summer and then do practice periods, or what was your relationship to Tassajara?
Well, I went pretty quickly, actually. We moved to San Francisco in the fall of '80, and I might started at Tassajara in the winter spring of '82. So, or I think that's right. Yeah, '82. So yeah, I spent about a year and a half in the city, and then I applied to go to Tassajara. Karen didn't apply to go to Tassajara. So I went first by myself, and then she was going to come down later that summer.
Was that hard to separate?
Not at first, but it got kind of long, and I started to kind of wonder how things were going to come back together, but they eventually did.
Did it feel like when you did Ango or practice period at Tassajara, did that seem like like step up the level of the intensity or depth of practice? Was it an easy transition for you, or were you like, whoa, this is like another thing entirely?
What came to mind when you said that, was when I went to jail. When I went to jail, it was like a really stark difference from the life I had prior to going to jail. Being in jail was a really different, it was like, this is really something. This is really different place to live. And Tassajara was like that too. And I mean, I'm not saying, when I got to Tassajara, and I stood there on the road looking down into the valley, I felt great joy. I felt great joy that I was entering that life. So it was a different thing, but, and I certainly didn't feel great joy on the first night in jail, but I felt, Tassajara also became, quite hard. It's a hard practice to do. I had the advantage of youth, I wasn't that young. I was like 34, but still relatively young. And you can't, there's nothing quite that can quite be compared to the immersion of a Tassajara practice period. There's no other distractions. You're just there doing the practice period and doing the work and living in the community and, studying and, having Dokusan, and that's your whole life. Listening to Dharma talks. There's no extra thing. So it's.
Did they make you do Tangaryo?
They invited me to do Tangaryo.
Yeah.
And I said, yes, I will do that. And yes, I did it with a stalwart crew of, I think, 5 other men. It turned out we were all men. And we, perhaps out of certain male group energy, we'll call it, we sat a very steady Tangaryo together.
I had to do it at Sonoma Mountain Zen Center. And I have to say that Tangaryo was 10 times harder than any 7-day sesshin I've ever done. I mean, it was like, that was the kind of the apex of my physical and mental challenge with Zen. That was really hard for me. Because, there's no kinhin, there's no walking meditation in there.
Right.
And plus, there's a group of you, and so there's competition of like, who's not gonna So I mean, there was probably times where I sat in cross-legged position for like 5 hours. It was too much. It was hard.
Yeah. Well, there's a certain, you couldn't do it if it also, if the energy didn't arise, or arrive, the energy arrives, that helps you do something like that, that helps you. And part of it comes from, your mates that you're doing it with, and part of it comes from the whole Sangha that comes in during, at Tassajara. You sit with everybody. When everybody's sitting, you're sitting with them and you're doing service with them. It's just that when they leave the Zendo, you don't.
Yeah. You were sitting in the Zendo?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. We were actually sequestered to another room. Yeah, we were.
Oh no, we were sitting in the Zendo.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So everything that would happen in the Zendo, whatever it was, we just participate in it, and then we just stay in the Zendo when everybody left.
Was Myo Lahey around at the time? And
yes.
And for people listening, Myo Lahey, he's the guiding teacher of Valley Streams, and now you're your ordination teacher. So that's the context of the question.
Right.
So was Myo? So Myo was around.
Yeah, that's how I met Myo. Was that he was. I think I watched his interview that you did, and I think neither of us were even lay ordained at that time, if I'm correct. But he was practicing there at that time.
So speaking of lay ordained, did you at this point? I mean, obviously, if you go to Tassajara and make it through the practice period, you're fairly committed. Did you foresee yourself getting ordained and becoming a monk and this being your life at this point, or were you just seeing this as a temporary phase to go through, or were you just not even thinking about it, just taking it day to day?
I really wasn't thinking about it myself. I really wasn't. I don't remember being very distracted by like, what am I going to do with the rest of my life or anything like that. I felt maybe more than I ever have in my life. I felt like I'm here doing this and it's enough. I felt that pretty much. I don't recall thinking like, well, gosh, what am I going to do after this? And am I going to go back and give my account, blah, blah, blah. I didn't have much of that, blah, blah, blah. I was just there, pretty much doing what was happening there. And I didn't know when it was going to be over. It actually ended a little sooner than I wish it had, but in retrospect, but yeah, I was lucky, I guess, in a certain way that I didn't really care too much about the future at that time. I wasn't too distracted by planning.
Interesting. You were, if I remember correctly, you were living at City Center when the crap went, or I was gonna say shit went down, but I shouldn't swear. But that when things kind of blew up with Baker, is that correct?
No, I was at Tassajara.
Oh, you're at Tassajara.
Yeah.
And so, did you see any rumblings of something was happening or anything was weird, or was it just completely blindsiding to everybody?
The only thing I was pretty, head down, I guess you'd say, in terms of my knowing about. I had heard some rumors about some things, but I had not really wanted to pay attention to them. I felt like I didn't want to be distracted by those rumors. And so I just kind of shut them out. And I wasn't, in a leadership position, or I wasn't in any kind of position to talk about anything that the teacher was doing. So I just didn't pay attention to it. But one thing that I did observe when Anna Hawken came down there, that I observed that she and Baker Roshi were in love. Mm-hmm. And I knew, I didn't think much more than that. I just observed, those two people are really in love. Mm-hmm. And I knew he was married, and I guess I knew she was married. But
it was also California in the 60s and 70s, and
I don't know what it was. I guess it wasn't my business or something. I guess that was my stance. I mean, nothing came up for me like I should speak up about this, or it wasn't. I was practicing. I was doing my practice. I guess I had my nose to the grindstone type of thing. But then when it still came as a huge shock, when we were informed that he had been asked to take a leave of absence, and that was a huge shock, really unbelievable. Everything sort of fell into place all at once, and it just really was shocking. But I'm glad I was at Tassajara when it happened, because at least there you had this great container of support in your practice, and no matter what was happening, I was going to be going to the Zendo. I mean, I was locked in. I wanted to be just practicing, doing my practice. I didn't want to get involved in a lot of other issues. And
who was leading the practice period at the time?
Well, that was one of the issues, is that at that time, essentially, Richard Baker led all practice periods. So, which of course was physically impossible, because there were practice periods at Tassajara, there were practice periods in the city, there were practice periods at Green Gulch, and he was ostensibly leading them all. Mm-hmm. And of course, so he wouldn't be at Tassajara for great swaths of time, and there would be a Tanto, but really we didn't really have a leader much of the time. It was just, there was senior staff, and we had trust in them, and so forth, and we had a head student, and we had trust in him or her, but we didn't there were great swaths of time we didn't see Richard Baker, and even though it was practice period.
And Reb had recently gotten transmission when the turmoil happened, right?
Yeah, he got it. I mean, he got it at Tassajara in the spring of 83. In the spring of 83, when we were there, he was with Richard Baker, and they were going around doing the transmission ceremony during. Yeah, I mean, he had just gotten that ritual completed essentially just a couple of months before Richard Baker was asked to take a leave of absence over this affair.
Yeah, I almost wonder the fact that there was now a plausible succession plan with Reb being there. I wonder if that kind of allowed some steam to, people felt less trapped as, Richard had been the only option or whatever, possibly.
It does seem like the universe provided some kind of opening for there to be a change in leadership right at that time, because Richard Baker did transmit to Reb, and so we had Reb, as someone who could carry on in it, so there wouldn't be a complete vacuum. And so we're lucky that happened that way, because it would have been much more chaotic, I think, if it hadn't. I think there would have been a way to move forward, but anyway, that's the way it happened.
So when Baker left, did you start working with Reb pretty quickly as your teacher?
Well, no, not really. There was just a lot of uncertainty at that time, and there was kind of a vacuum really for a while. I mean, in terms of and of course it was hard to trust. There was a real gap in trusting, and so that happened in the spring of 83, and Karen and I stayed that summer, but then we left in the fall of 83. We left Tassajara, went back to the city, and there was still a lot of meetings. We went to a lot of meetings about the future and about the past and about the trust that had been broken. There was lots of meetings that we went back to and participated in. We participated in them at Tassajara before we left too. But no, I mean, I didn't, there was just kind of a vacuum really for a while. I mean, I don't remember, when, Mel stepped in. I believe Mel Weitzman stepped into the breach a bit, and Katagiri stepped into the breach a bit.
Did he? Were you there when he was the teacher, or interim or whatever, or you already left?
Well, when Mel was there,
No, Katagiri.
Well, we knew Katagiri, and I had Dokusan with Katagiri, and but. Yeah, I don't remember. We started to move away from Zen Center by 84. We had moved away. Actually, we moved
physically.
We moved to Marin County, and I got a job working for Steve Stuckey, who was a priest at Zen Center. Later became abbot, but at that time he had a landscaping business, and he was a landscape designer and builder of gardens, and so. I went to work for him after we left Tassajara, and yeah.
Did you maintain your daily practice?
Oh yeah, I never stopped. I really trusted practice, and so I would not be dissuaded from continuing my practice because of these issues. I mean, that I was too far gone for that.
Would it be fair to say you were maybe demoralized a little bit culturally and socially with Zen Center, but not with practice itself? Or is that going too far?
I wasn't demoralized with Zen Center. I mean, I didn't hold on to that too much. I think just, I was married, and there was we had some ideas about having a child, and there was, it just kind of felt like maybe there's something, what's the next thing to do? And so I got this job with Steve, which kept me connected to Zen Center, and certainly to him as a person and as a priest and a very, very experienced practitioner. I was working for him every day. So, I learned a lot from
at that point.
What's that?
Did he have transmission yet at that point? Probably not, right? In the 80s?
I don't think so. No. In fact, when I was working for him, he was head student.
Okay.
And he was a priest, I believe. But yeah, he was a priest, but didn't have Dharma transmission at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But he was head student in the city while I was working for him. So I was kind of like left alone a lot to work on the jobs, and he was doing the impossible of being a head student in San Francisco and building gardens in Marin. And he was an incredibly energetic and committed person, and I learned a lot from him in many ways. So in a way, my practice continued in that working, I had a relationship with Steve, and that was an important relationship for me. I wasn't always entirely comfortable with it because he was my boss, but still, it was an important relationship.
Was your relationship informal with him, or would you actually have Dokusan with him and stuff?
No, I didn't. But after I quit working for him, which I did after a couple of years, I would go to his talks, and I participated in his little home Sangha in Mill Valley, and so I kept up a relationship with him while we lived there.
And then at what point did you start working with Reb as a teacher?
Well, after there wasn't any jukais, but I had decided to receive the precept. I wanted to receive the precepts, and I asked Reb, and he said yes. And I don't remember when that was, but I started sewing the rakusu, and it took me a long time because I wasn't much of a sewer, and I lived in Marin, and I couldn't get to the classes and so forth very often. But I did get it sewn, and I took jukai in 1985, which was the first jukai, I think, that happened after Richard Baker left. There were not, and there was a big group of us that took jukai at that time, like huge. I mean, the Buddha Hall in the city, and there was probably 25 of us or something that received the precepts at that time. Yeah, it was a big
one ceremony.
Yeah, one ceremony.
Wow.
Yeah, it seemed to me it was that big. It was maybe 20, but it was a big jukai.
And did you, prior to that, did you consider yourself a disciple of Reb, or is it more he's the teacher? If you want to take jukai, he's the person you take it from? I mean, did you feel a connection to him as a teacher?
Oh yeah, I certainly felt connection to him as a teacher, and I certainly respected him. As the successor of Richard Baker. I've never had I've never really put the teacher at the center of my practice exactly. The teacher is an important person for me, and I really respect the teacher, but I haven't put the teacher in quite at the center. I mean, the Sangha is also really important to me, and study is important to me. So it's all kind of equal to me. Not, I don't really privilege the teacher over the Dharma and the Sangha, I guess.
Did you do a Shusho? Now you've made me self-confident. I'm not sure if I'm saying it right. Shusho, prior, while you're still living and working in Marin? Or is that something?
No. So then I well, we've gone on for an hour. I don't know how people are going to want to listen to this for too much longer, but I lived in Marin for a while. I'll just give a real précis, and then decided I needed, and I'd worked for Steve, and I decided, I was getting to be almost 40, and I decided I'm probably not going to be able to keep up this, landscaping and gardening for the rest of my life. So I decided to go back to school. And long story short, I went back to school in this first at San Francisco State, and then I got into a program at UC Davis in community development, and completed that program while still living in Marin, and but got familiar with this area and decided to move up here during after getting my degree at UC Davis, or master's degree in community development. I got a job at the state and moved up here in 1991, and joined a local Sangha here called Sacramento Buddhist Meditation Group, which was
I thought you started that group. So it was already...
Well, I was part of the starters, yeah. I mean, I wasn't the very starter, but I went to the first meeting, and I quickly volunteered to, keep the group going. And so I was part of the starters, but and then we stayed with that group for a long time, and then in 2000 or so, Reb invited me to come back to Green Gulch and join a group called the Bleeding Horses, which was studying the precepts with him. And I'd received the precepts, but he's as you know, he's a big he a student of the precepts and teacher of the precepts, and has written on the precepts and considers them such an important part of our practice. And he's had many different groups, and this was a group that was studying Dogen's Kyoju Kaimon, Kyoju Kaimon Sutra on Receiving the Precepts. And so I went back to that, and then at one point and I was going down to Green Gulch like a monthly basis or something like that. And at one point he said to that group, any of you who want to be Shuso are eligible to be Shuso if you want. And I was like, oh yeah, I want to do that. And so I jumped forward. I mean, I told him, yes, if you say that, I would like to do that. So I was still a lay person, but we arranged that I would be. And so I was Shuso for a practice period at Green Gulch in 2002, and which was an incredible, what a privilege to do that. I mean, it's such an amazing privilege to be able to.
Were you working for the state at that point?
No, I got a job with the state at first up here, but then I was working for the Housing and Redevelopment Agency in the county and city of Sacramento.
Was it hard? The reason I'm asking, was it hard to get a leave of absence for 2 or 3 months to
well, I was in management at that point, and somebody else had done something like that. They'd taken off like a leave of absence, and so I asked if I could, and I saved my vacation, and I was gone for 9 weeks, but they let me go. They let me do it, which was, well, thank you so much, Sacramento Housing and Redevelopment Agency, that let me do that and let me get away. But because it was just what a wonderful privilege that is to be able to do, and in that. You meet with everybody in the practice period, you have tea with everybody, you give lectures in the Zendo, you give 3 lectures in the Zendo. I mean, my gosh, what a wonderful thing. And then, sitting next to your teacher, Reb's like sitting there and I'm sitting here, and, it was just such a hard thing to do, not easy and frightening in a way at first. But once you get into the spirit of the practice period, it's not so hard. It just
did he give you any guidance, or just like, okay, you're Shuso, go jump in?
Did he give me guidance?
Yeah, like did he say?
Yes, he gave me guidance. He gave me various mostly he pointed out things that I was not doing right.
Form-wise or
Just kind of, especially at first, coming from the outside, I needed a little bit of attitude adjustment. Okay. And just some subtle things. But I'm especially when Reb says something, I listen closely and I make a quick adjustment when, I don't linger like arguing about it. I don't think too much. So once I got into the rhythm of the practice period, within a couple of weeks, I felt like I'm on an equal footing with everybody here. Everybody's here doing the practice period, whether they're a longtime resident or whether there's someone like me that's just coming in for the outside to do 9 weeks in the monastery or in the temple, as it were.
So how did you? So you're part of Sacramento Buddhist Meditation Group, which is non-denominational Buddhism, and it's peer-led. There's no teacher that's part. There's no teacher at the Sangha. It's at least now, and I seen back then, you're just inviting teachers in. It's very much peer-led. How did you? Did early on? Did you have aspirations to create a Zen only group, or like how did that come about?
Well, that's another one of these junctures where the universe kind of stepped forward because I came back. I had I never really had I can assure you actually that I didn't have an aspiration to start a Zen practice place, but I did come back from being head student with a great deal of enthusiasm for practice, and renewed enthusiasm and energy, and so this is the universe said, well, okay, you got this energy, so here's something. And there had been this guy who started a Zen sitting group over at the Unitarian Church here in Sacramento. And somehow he knew about me because he was a student of Blanche Hartman's. That's how, I think. And I had gone to his group a few times, but I hadn't really, joined it. And I came back from being head student, and a few months later or weeks later, he called me up and said, I don't want to do this sitting group anymore, but we have all these zafus and zabatans and bells and so forth. Would you like to take it over? And I really didn't have any, hadn't made a plan to do so, but then it was just being offered to me. So I talked to some other stalwarts who had been practicing here and at Green Gulch and so forth, and about an idea of us assuming the responsibility for that group. And we did. Was
Oscar and Linda and kind of that group, were they involved?
Yeah, Oscar and Linda and some other people that aren't involved anymore that were involved. But yeah, so there was this group, and he didn't want to really be taking care of it anymore. And so he asked me, well, would you like to, and your friends like to take care of it? And we said yes. And then shortly thereafter, I thought, well, I'm not going to really set myself up as the teacher or the leader of this group. I'll certainly, show up and make it happen. But I felt like I needed help. So that's when we we decided to contact Myo, who we had some visits from before. And we knew, and of course I knew from way going back, to the my early days at Tassajara, and contacted Myo. And it was one of the amazing things he did. I don't think he emphasized this, but while he was Tanto at Tassajara, way down there, 6 hours from here, and he came to give Dharma talk, like for one evening. He came all the way from Tassajara to give a Dharma talk here for one evening and then to go all the way back to Tassajara. You know, that was really so kind and really made a difference. And it really made a difference to me that we had such a senior teacher coming to offer that. And I felt so supported by that. And I think the whole group did. So anyway, he agreed to become, after, you know, leaving Tassajara, he maybe even before too, he agreed to be our guiding teacher. So we've always, you know, for 20 years now, we've had his support for our efforts here.
So I want to be respectful of your time. We're already about an hour and 15 minutes in it, but I would like to hear a little bit about your transition from layman to priest, if you could talk a little bit about that. So you got ordained about 6 years ago now, right?
We got ordained in 2016, so I guess that's 6 years.
Yeah. So, you know, at that point, you'd been a pretty committed lay practitioner for what, like 40 years or something, right? Yeah, 35 years. Or,
yeah.
Not to, sorry to make you feel old or whatever, but
I am old.
yeah. So what precipitated that change from layman to priest? Like, because that's a pretty drastic change.
Well, it had been suggested to me earlier when I was working by Reb and by Reverend Myo that I consider ordaining, but I just I couldn't do it. I had a very responsible job and really, a lot of responsibility, and it was a difficult job, and I was in over my head in a way, and I had to put all my energy into that to make it even, you know, make it successful. So I couldn't really think about it. And then I retired, and you know, then I could have thought about it, but then I got this other idea that wouldn't it be good if we had a permanent place to practice here in Sacramento? And right after I retired, I started talking to people about doing something about our having a permanent place to practice, because for, you know, 20 years up to that point, we've been, you know, practicing in church basements and, you know, yoga studios and that sort of thing. And so I really threw my energy into the idea of creating what is now the Sacramento Dharma Center. And that involved a lot of effort as well, talking to people, getting kind of consensus that we would want to do something like that. We spent a year talking about even the possibility of doing something like that, and then forming a.
But from the beginning, were you looking for a spot for? Were you guys called Valley Streams at that point, or still Iron Bell?
No, I forget when we changed the name.
Well, anyway,
somewhere around there.
Were you looking for just Valley Streams, or a spot for just Valley Streams, or from the beginning did you conceive of it as multiple sanghas coming together to pool resources?
Yeah, the latter. I didn't think that we had the resources as a small Zen Sangha that any way we could pull off having our own place. But I thought together, if there had been Sacramento Buddhist meditation group and then two offshoots, one which became Valley Streams and the other which became the Sacramento Insight Meditation group. And I thought if we pooled back together, we could do something collectively. That was my idea. And so it turned out that we could, and we did. And you know the Dharma Center, but that was anyway. Your original question was, when did I think about becoming a priest? I started thinking about it after I retired, but I was really throwing all my energy into this Dharma Center idea, and I was then ultimately on the board of that and involved in looking at real estate and so forth. And after that effort went on for a while, and we were getting somewhere in terms of raising money, but not finding a place. I decided, okay, enough is enough. This can go on without me, I hope. And I am going to focus on sewing an okesa. And so I dropped off the board of the Dharma Center and focused on sewing an okesa. And then I was ordained.
Yeah. I know Reb was your teacher. I know Reb has really strict standards, not standards, but rules about getting ordained with him? You have to live with him for 5 years. Is that right?
You can get ordained without living with him for 5 years, but your commitment is that,
Okay.
you will live with him for 5 years.
Okay, I have it backwards. Yeah.
Subsequently.
Yeah, so that's why it really wasn't an option to get ordained with Reb, I suspect.
Right, that wouldn't have been an option.
Mm-hmm. So Myo took you on as a project then.
Well, and Myo made more sense, really. I had a more active relationship with him. I was seeing him more, and I was going to sessions at his place. And it made more sense for me to ask Myo. And he turned me down actually the first time. I don't think he remembers that, but he did basically turn me down. But I asked again later, and he said that would be all right. He would do that. And so, yeah, that came to pass.
Did you do any, at that point, did you go back and do any more practice periods, or did you stay in Sacramento for your priest training?
What Myo asked, I had done a number of intensives at Green Gulch after I retired. I did 3 in a row right after I retired, each January for 3 weeks. And then I did some sporadic ones. And then after I ordained, Myo said, you should go. Well, actually, I can't remember. He asked me to do one right around the time I was being ordained. And then I think he wanted me to do one as a priest, which I did. And that was really valuable for me to go to be in an intensive as a priest. And in addition to that, I was Reb's Jisha for that intensive. So that was also a wonderful privilege to be able to be really close with him for 3 weeks. And I was kind of his personal assistant and Jisha during that time. And that was really great. I wish I could do that again, but then we got COVID, and it hasn't been so easy. So,
how has being ordained changed your practice? Part of being a priest is outward facing. You're now, it's now kind of a path of service. Is that a fair characterization of what it's been like for you? More outward facing practice, because you've always been an organizer in some ways, as far as the Dharma Center and the groups, and you're really good at getting people to do things together. But so was it kind of no transition, or did it feel differently to be a priest for you?
It is wonderful to wrap yourself in Buddha's robe, and that definitely feels different. Each time I do it, I don't know that I identify with being a priest, but I do consider it something like a privilege, and something like that I need to live up to, and I hope to live up to, and I pray to live up to. And if I fall down in my role, it's so much more obvious, because I'm leading service and giving lectures during sessions and so forth, which are things that usually only a priest does. Oftentimes only a transmitted priest does. Well, not service, but lectures in the session mostly are usually done by Dharma transmitted people, but here we don't have such people, so I fill in. It's like being a priest isn't like a robe of authority or something like that. It's an honor, and it's a statement of devotion to the Dharma, and a great wish to offer the Dharma to other people. That I feel like I have this great wish to offer the Dharma to other people. And I think as a priest, it's clear that that's what I should be doing. Or, yes, you probably should be doing that, you should be offering the Dharma as best you can to other people, and extolling the benefits of practice life.
I mean, from my perspective, it almost seems like a full-time job for you as far as your level of commitment.
It's not like a full-time job as it would be for a priest in a temple, but for a person still, living as a householder, with other responsibilities, it is a wonderful avocation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I get invitations to do things that are memorial services, and I married somebody, and these things that are real stretches for me to do. I remain a quite self-conscious person in a lot of ways, and never imagined myself in such kinds of roles of such visibility, which it's quite, I'm still that kid, that was not so verbal as a young person, not so one that didn't want to be up in front of the class. And so I still struggle with that whatever it is, deficit or
I don't think it's a deficit.
Preference. I don't know, but it's hard, to take the leadership role, but it's also a great privilege. I'm doing my best.
So that beautiful enso behind you, could you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, that's by a fellow. His name is Fabio. I don't remember his last name, but when in 2019, just before pandemic started, I got to go with the Upaya Zen Center on a trip to Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And it was led by Roshi Joan Halifax and Kaz Tanahashi
Mm-hmm.
sensei. And as you know, Kaz is a master of brush painting,
Mm-hmm.
and he teaches brush painting. And one of his disciples was on this trip to Japan, and he brought with him, somehow, I don't know how he did it, rolled up, I guess, samples of his work. And toward the end of the trip, he in the town of Nara, he offered to sell some of these works. And so this is a enzo that he did, Fabio. He's from Brazil, and he is a disciple of Kaz's in the art of brush painting.
So you went to both China and Japan on a pilgrimage of sort, right?
Yes, both of them with Kaz, and both sponsored by Upaya Zen Center.
Of the two, which one was more like awe-inspiring, or I don't even know if I know the right.
Oh, you can't word. Compare. I mean, that's useless. I mean, they're both extremely. I would say though that I will say that being in the monastery in China,
Mm-hmm.
where, I mean, who knows what it looked like at that time, or even if any of the same buildings are there, probably not. But we were in the monastery, Tentong Monastery,
Mm-hmm.
Where Dogen went to meet his teacher, Nyojo, Rujing.
Mm-hmm.
And we were in that monastery, and there's a special wing or a room, kind of a wing, that's devoted to Dogen there in China. And the Japanese Soto Shu keeps that room up, and they have images of Dogen in that room, and they have some calligraphy and different things. And just being in that monastery and imagining, that actually Dogen, well, the trip was called In Dogen's Footsteps,
Okay.
and we were like in Dogen's footsteps. He was there, and that's the place. So that
Did
was
they make you sit on a ship for a couple weeks until you got your papers in order? I'm just joking.
We got to sit in the Zendo there, even.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, for a little short time.
And on your Japanese trip, you went to Eheiji, is that correct?
On our own, yeah. Karen
Was
and I
that special?
went for a one-night stay.
Yeah. Was that special?
That was very special. Yes,
Yeah.
that was also
Uh-huh.
in Dogen's footsteps.
Yeah. What was how was that energy there? Did it seem really intense, or I mean, did it seem Tassajara like in its intensity, or was it just hard to tell as a
Oh,
outsider?
it's a training I mean, it's one of the two premier training monasteries of the Soto school. So it's the service was, what was it? Like an hour and a half long, and just they let you come and watch the service, witness the service, and we came and witnessed the service, and so there's just incredible energy. But the other place we got to go in Japan was Rinzo-in, which is where Suzuki Roshi, that's its home temple, and it's where his grandson now is the head priest. And that was a visit that Karen and I also arranged on our own, and that was also in Suzuki Roshi's footsteps. So wonderful opportunity. I feel very complete because of those trips.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, is there anything else you want to talk about, or do you want to wrap things up?
No, I think I've talked way more than anybody's going to want to listen to, but I'm happy to have done it, Barry, and I appreciate you doing these records of.
Yeah, well, very appreciative of you taking the time and being willing to do it. Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.